Everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for the live-action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop. So, as the title says, I actually enjoyed the show. I don't think it was perfect or anything like that, but as someone who clearly, based on, as you can see, all the Cowboy Bebop stuff I got around me, I liked it. I liked the show, the original series, and this I enjoyed just enough. Just enough to be like, okay, let's see what happens. Now, I can totally understand why people don't like this, especially because, that's the fair point. Some people will say, it's not fair to compare a remake to an original, which I don't think makes any sense. You basically have to. You literally have something that only exists because the old thing exists. Everything I have here on me, this shirt, the records, the display, the figures, everything, all existed before this live action show did, and it's all based on the anime. So, any comparison is 100% warranted. And I understand comparing, Cowboy Bebop, the anime, which is seen as parting the heavens. You look at God tier anime, and it's oh look, there's Cowboy Bebop. People love Cowboy Bebop for a reason. It's not just oh, it's an early show that was on Adult Swim. There's a bunch of stuff on Adult Swim. I don't give a shit about Beyblade, and that's old as fuck. It's who cares? Cowboy Bebop though is actually really good. So I know people like Beyblade, so don't come at me. I just don't care. But Cowboy Bebop has lasted for a really long time. And then we got this live action show. And going into it, we got the live action opening. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. The running in place thing was really bad. But then we got the little featurette stuff where they did the cool stylized stuff. And they're, pulling the bar across. I was like, okay. They at least have that, anime flair and style. I figured the whole show wouldn't be like that where they're just grabbing bars to transition. I knew it wouldn't be like that. At least I hoped it would. But I was like, okay, this at least shows that they have more of that style, that, sort of anime feel to it, transition into live action. And I was hopeful. And then just going through the whole first episode, I was like, all right, I think they did a good job. That doesn't mean they did a great job, but they did a good enough job for me to be like, I don't think this is horrible. Some stuff in it, I definitely don't like. I can say that 100% where I'm I got used to it, but I was never I really enjoy this because, of course, comparisons to the original series where it's all right, well, these are the same characters. It's not like a spin-off or alternate version. I mean, technically, this has to be an alternate version from the original because things are so drastically different, especially by the time we hit the end. But it's just all right, I have to compare it to what we've had in the past, and it's just different. Not all the characters are the same. The only two characters that are 100% themselves are Ain and Jet. Those two characters, Jet is the 100% was that's just Jet, and here he is in live action. It was yep, that's the same dude. So Jet was absolutely perfection, and then everyone else was I enjoy them, but they're definitely different than these characters right here. So going through it, I finished the whole season, and I'm looking forward to season 2. I'm certainly more curious than looking forward to it, but I'm gonna watch it for sure if it gets a season 2. I mean, the rate considering the ratings, it might not get enough money to get a season 2. They might not even bother with that, but they can only do 2 seasons anyway. I hope. That's just me hoping because the series is only 26 episodes and they've already hit 10 episodes with this, and they're hour long or 40 minutes or so. So they're basically at the same amount of time. You get 26 episodes, that's just just under 13 hours for the show, not counting even intros and outros. That's under 13 hours. They're already hitting almost 10 hours. So it's they're already doing stuff that's going to be way beyond the amount of story that they actually had in the original series. Which oddly enough kind of works because there's so much stuff that's not in here, considering that series, the original, is every single episode is its own thing. They're going on a bounty. They meet some random dude. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I was kind of hoping that they would throw in that cowboy guy who was really stupid, or the samurai cowboy guy. I love that episode. That's one of my favorite episodes ever because Spike hated that dude, and it was just really, really funny. And I was kind of hoping that he'd be in this, but they didn't do that. So if we do get a season 2, if there's any one thing that I want to see them do, because everything is already crazy anyway by the time we hit the end of this, at least just throw the guy in. Just so we can have that, because I think they could do that, and it would just be really funny. So I hope we get that, at the very least. I hope we get that guy, because that was just funny to me. But going through the whole thing, I enjoyed it just enough to be all right, I like the show. I think they definitely captured the style well. That's the thing. Jet, it's a dog. But Jet is actually perfect. The characters act really well. It's just how they're written. Specifically, Faye is my least favorite. And of course, I'll get to some of that in spoilers. But I would say the thing that kind of messes up the main crew of the series is, at least for, Spike and Faye, they are themselves. And that's the funny thing, because I'm this is exactly who the person is in the anime, except they act differently. It's like the same person, it's just the way that they act and kind of portray how they feel. Spike's sarcasm is definitely upped. Like, he's definitely more jokey. Excuse me. He's definitely more jokey and stuff like that. And with Faye, she hated everybody. That was like the whole thing in the show was like, yeah, she kind of hates everybody. She's doing her own thing because of the stuff that happened to her in the past. It was like, yeah, that's her character. But in this, she's far more outgoing with it, where she'll just drop F-bombs and be like, F you and stuff like that. And eventually, you know, I'm like, this is just that version of Faye, so I got used to it. And some of it was funny, but she's the character that just swears all the time. And it's not that much, but she definitely just, everybody's an a-hole, you know, F you and this and that. And so I'm like, okay, that's her character. And so it's them still. Like, I can tell, like, at the core, I'm like, that's still Spike. That's still Faye. But they had to, like, heighten it, which they didn't really need to do, because they could have just done what they did in the anime. It totally works. That would work live action. It's still just people being human people. But they definitely amped it up to kind of add to sort of the banter of the characters. And I was like, for Spike, I liked it a little bit more, because I was like, okay, yeah, you could definitely tell that Spike was always that person. And the thing that always made him so, you know, solemn and stuff like that was all the crazy stuff going on with Julie and Vicious. And I was like, I'm okay with him being a bit more outgoing and like expressing his emotions a bit more, because he was always kind of like, it was either sarcasm or it was kind of just like really cool quips and stuff like that, and then that was about it. So I was okay with him being like more sarcastic and kind of messing with Jet a little bit more. So I was okay with that. And then, like I said, with Faye, it was just way more outlandish. And I was like, it just feels weird, because I'm like, I know that was her thing, is that she was kind of, you know, a woman against the world because of what she was dealing with. But in this, she's just so far out there. I guess it just makes her seem less cool. I think that's what it really is. It makes her less cool, because in the other one, she hated everybody, but she was just so cool about it. It was like, I really like her. Like, she's an asshole, but I like her. And then in this, it was like, well, she's just an asshole in this one. And it just, like, as she builds with the team, it becomes more entertaining. And I think that was something they did well with this, where she actually sticks with the team a lot more, especially considering they introduced her in, like, the first episode. And then she comes back, you know, a couple later. So I was like, okay, I kind of like what they did with that, where they make them even more of a team than they really are actually in the anime. So I was like, I'm okay with that, specifically for Faye's character, because, you know, Jet is perfect, and then Spike I was okay with. And then Faye, I was like, I got okay with that as time went on. Like, when she officially joined the crew, I was like, okay, it toned things down a bit, and she was like, okay, I can kind of relax a little. And then I felt like she started to become more in line with her anime counterpart, like, you know, especially by the time we get to the end, I was like, okay, I kind of feel like she, through the journey of this first season, she becomes more like her counterpart, but she's still definitely more out there as far as insulting people, and it just doesn't feel, it's not, you know, it's not as suave as the way I feel Faye would kind of insult pretty much everybody in the original series. But I still enjoyed the transition, at least. But she was definitely my least favorite, as far as how they changed some of this stuff. Actually, that's not true. As far as the main crew, she was my least favorite. We'll just officially go into spoilers. It's hard to say. You should totally check it out. If you aren't, like, gonna lose your mind that it's different from the anime, just check it out. Like, if you like the original, I think you should check this out, because some stuff they definitely do right. The essence is good. The music is still good. The visuals are good. And it's not like horrible CG or anything like that. I actually think they do a really good job for everything that has to be fake, or all the sets that they made. Everything actually looks really freaking sweet. The only thing that was really weird is when they would show, like, the nice parts of, you know, the place that they go to, because then it looks like modern day. But everything else is like that weird future dystopian sort of situation, and I enjoy that. So I think the essence is good. The characters kind of, you know, as far as the main crew, Jet is the best, and then Spike, and then Faye for me. Ein, I guess, would technically be number 2, but Ein is like, they just have Ein, and it's like, dog, good to go. So that, you know, there's that, and then, you know, we get to the villain, I should say, and then Julia. So getting into full-on spoilers, check it out or don't. I don't know. It's so hard to give a definitive thing. I think it's worth it. That's all I can really say. I feel like it's worth checking out just because it's entertaining. Excuse me. But going into full spoilers, the first episode, I think they did a good job. They did a great reference. You know, Watanabe Casino. Shinichiro Watanabe is the creator of the series. In fact, he created all 3 of these shows. So you got Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, Space Dandy, you know, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Dandy. If you have not seen Space Dandy, that's a trip. That's a heck of a show to watch. It's just crazy. That's all I can say. It's insane. First episode, I think they did a good job. The casino heist thing was really entertaining. They introduced Faye insanely early on, but I was like, yo, no big deal, because the whole point of the show is that it's just piece by piece, it was building the characters more than having an overall story, and that was the huge thing that changed with the show. It was like, that's what the show used to be, but the live action version is like, no, it's kind of a classic show where everything is just, here's the beginning of the story, and it all carries along. Even how they get introduced to some of the villains is specifically tied to Vicious actually hiring a dude, like one of the notable villains of the series. It's like, oh, this is the dude, and he's hired to kill Spike, and then, oh, look at that, he ends up at a random amusement park, and this is how he ends up dressed this way. And it's like, okay, they changed some stuff up just to have both sides of the story tie in. As we're in the original series, of course, it was just like, here's like 3 episodes that actually even remotely involve Spike and his backstory, and then other than that, it's just like, oh, here's a sad thing that makes Spike a little sad, and he thinks about sad stuff. Other than that, you got nothing. Like, this show was like, no, here's the hero story, here's the villain story. It was like looking at Sonic and Shadow. That was basically what we were watching. It was Sonic Adventure 2. Sonic over here doing his thing, and here's Shadow over here doing his thing. And that's what we got for the whole season. And I was like, it's interesting. I like seeing more of Vicious. I wish he killed like 100 more people, honestly, because it's Vicious, and that's kind of his thing. Stop me if you've heard the story before, but there's this badass guy whose name starts with a V. He has cool anime style white hair, and he uses a katana. He's the villain. You're supposed to hate him, but he's super cool, so he's the best character. That's Vicious. And Virgil, of course. That's the other guy I was referencing. Virgil from Devil May Cry. Those 2 characters, I love them. They're great. I probably can't say Vicious is still like my favorite character of the show, and that's just because he shows up too little to even be my favorite. But he's definitely, there's, like 5-6 main characters. He's definitely like in the top 3, admittedly. So having him more in this, some parts were good. Some parts I enjoyed, like we actually got to see him actually take out the elders, and I was like, okay, that's something that was interesting. And it was like, oh, in the actual original series, it was just like, yeah, he's making a play for it, and he does it. And so I was like, oh man, he's, it's going to be real crazy if you try to take him out and, in the syndicate pretty much. So it was interesting to actually see him take that first step. And, when he comes back covered in blood, they put him in like the white suit, and he's just covered in blood. And I was like, that's Vicious. That's the Vicious that I think of. Bird missing, of course, but, a bunch of CG. I understand that. So it was cool. That scene I really loved. Other than that, though, he was a dude who had daddy issues, and he was like the guy that everyone hated. Like, he wasn't just the spoiled rich kid. He was like the rich kid who was treated real shitty, but some part of him was like, I just gotta, I gotta impress my dad. I gotta impress my dad. So like, he would kind of get off on his dad's name. Like, they even referenced that, like, if I got us into a mess, Spike, you could talk us out of it. If that didn't work, I'll just pull my dad's name out, and then typically, we were all good. But clearly, he was effed up, which, let's be honest. He had to watch his mom walk off a building, and his dad's like, she's weak. I'm like, that, yeah, of course he got effed up. He was a 9-year-old kid who cried as his mom stepped off a building, and it was just like, okay. Because when he first said it, I was like, that's super effed up. He made his son watch a video, and then he talked about it, and I was like, oh, he was there as she stepped off the building. Because I thought he was like, he made me watch. I thought he meant it was like a security video, and he had to watch his mom walk off the building, which is more than enough. But then it was like, the story kept going, and he's like, as she was standing there at the edge of the thing, my dad's whispering in my ear, and I was like, oh no, he was like just a couple feet back, and he just watched her die. And I was like, that's why he's insane. And then of course he says, my dad was right. And then it's like, and that's where you got fucked up. Like, he's just like, your insane dad made you insane, and it just went from there, and he's the murderer guy. They even show it when Spike was trying to, he was killing like the lawyer, and then Vicious was just like, let me shank him. And he just shanked him. I'm like, there's no reason to do that. So they have that whole moment, and it's like, the dichotomy of these 2 characters. They're brothers, but that's why he's Vicious. He's just crazy. So they do some stuff where it works, but a lot of it is just him having daddy issues and things like that. Like, if they just showed him being Vicious and he just like killed people, and it was like, he's just going through, like, even if they did it where we saw what he was doing, but it didn't involve Spike until like later in the season, I think that would have been cooler, because it would have just been him dealing with the syndicate, and then it wouldn't have been like, especially because they're going into the the second season, they wouldn't have even had to really do any of the stuff that they did at the end where they actually involve the love triangle. It could have just been Spike is doing his mission. They're good. They showed us Vicious anyway, and it could have just been him doing his own thing, and then maybe in like the last 2 or 3 episodes, which I think would have fit way better, because it would have kind of excuse me, line things up like the anime, just have a couple of episodes where they actually know about each other and truly interact. I think that would have been better. Like, if they had done almost like the original, where basically they don't know he's alive for like half the show, and I think it was like maybe halfway through is when they do the church scene in the original series, which is kind of what they do here. Is like, the end of the first season, which I hope and I would imagine they can only possibly do 2 seasons. I don't see how they could even think to try to do more than 2 seasons, because that just doesn't make any sense unless they just go insanely off the rails. I guess that's the only thing. But I'm like, they've already done a lot of weird stuff. Like, we get to the end, just to jump to the end there, just flopping Julia, where it's like, poof, she now has ambitions to just run the syndicate. She doesn't want to escape or anything like that. It was like, what about what I want? And I'm like, she could have had what she wanted and not just shot Spike at the end. And I was just like, I don't get her character anymore, because going through the process, like, I understand her hatred towards Vicious. That's simple. Like, her having the scheme to kill him off, and them doing that I was okay with, because it was like, okay, it kind of makes it seem like she's taking really just more of a role. I mean, heck, they put Vicious in so many episodes and she's in it as well. It kind of fit. I was like, okay, we have to see more of them anyway. They might as well do something with her character and give her more agency to gain her own freedom. And I was cool with that. And then it just switched at the end, because I was like, when she's trying to kill Vicious, it seemed like she was still just trying to escape, and that I was okay with. But then it was like, oh, okay, so the elders are dead. Things kind of went a little crazy, and then I guess her whole plan was to have the elders killed off and have him killed off so she could take the 3rd spot. And that was her plan the whole time, I guess. And then it was like, they get to the end, and when Spike is like, I don't want that life. I don't want the power. I literally just want the freedom 100%. It wasn't just like, I'm low on the totem pole, so let's get out of here. It's like, I effed up. Like, I killed a kid. That was like this whole thing. I just want to be free. And she's like, oh, okay. F you then, dude. And then she shoots him out the window, and I was like, that's weird. Like, I know she, I don't know. It was just weird to me, because I'm like, the dude, it's not like he wasn't attempted murder was kind of placed on this guy. It's not like he really had much of a choice. So that was weird. Like, even her being upset at the beginning, like, before, things calmed down, where she was like, okay, everything's cool. Even when she first got upset with him, I was a little annoyed, because I'm like, what was he going to do? Like, even if he didn't believe that, what was he going to do to go back and get her against the syndicate? Like, it's the syndicate. I guess he could have gone to his friend. I can't think of her name right now, but I guess he could have gone to her early on and be like, hey, get the... Excuse me, sorry, I'm coming off a stupid cold. There we go. Get the word out to Julia. We can, meet up and then take off to the stars or whatever. I guess that could have been his plan. But just the word syndicate implies, like, a bunch of people. So I don't know what she was thinking. I just don't know if it made any sense to be that mad at him, all things considered. Especially because I'm like, I know he said he loved her. But honestly, even in this, they give us so much detail where I'm like, was that like 3 days? Just watching it, because like in the anime, they don't really tell you a bunch of stuff, and they kind of specify, like, I think they do say, like, towards the end of the series, they make it seem like they knew each other for a long time, like all 3 of them knew each other for a long time. But in the show, it was like Vicious and Spike knew each other, and then Julia came in, and they dated for like a couple of weeks or whatever, and then it seemed like he slept with her like that one night, and then he fell in love with her. Like, they don't really make it seem like there was a long time between him sleeping with her and then them, trying to do that grand escape, because I guess that was implied, and maybe I just missed it in the episode, that they'd been sleeping together on the side for a super long time. But I swear it was like they slept together that first night. He got called out for, like, killing the dude, and so I'm like, that's literally all in one day. Like, he fell in love with her in one day. Like, I know they danced, but I'm just like, it felt kind of stupid. Like, in the actual show, I was like, it was a day. Like, I know they had sex, but wasn't it once? So I was very confused. I was genuinely a little confused. So I'm like, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me compared to the anime, where it seemed like they were in love for a long time. They danced, and then they made out. Then they banged. He was called in that night. And then that same night, he went to, like, almost kill Vicious. And then he killed all the other people. And then he left, like, the next day. Or even then the same night. I feel like that wasn't even a full 24 hours. They slept together once, and then he fell in love with her. And so I was like, this doesn't work as much as, like, an actual love story. This just seems like a dude that's never loved anyone, ever. And then he just, like, fell in love and was just dumb about it. And I was like, I don't think I like it as much. It just feels weird. It seems so insanely fast. And she was going to go with him, too. I'm just like, this just seems weird, doesn't it? Like it just seems so insanely fast compared to the anime. I was like, this doesn't really make as much sense because they don't know each other. Like, it was kind of implied because it was like, oh, Vicious said like, oh, she finds you funny and stuff, and so it was like somewhat implied, but to have that first moment, where they do the dance and she like bumps into him, and then that's it, and I was just like, that just seems weird. This seems so fast, and it just makes it seem like a dumb young guy who never had been in love before, and he's like, we had sex once, like my penis went in there, and then I fell in love. That's literally what it felt like. I'm like, it's been 24 hours, and he's like, I love you, let's escape. And I was just like, doesn't feel the same. Doesn't feel like true love. But either way, got weird. She becomes the villain. I guess she's taking over the syndicate. Who the F knows what season 2 is going to be? Because I'm like, it would have been fine. All they had to do was just have it where, even with everything that happened, where she knew that he was alive and stuff, and even if she kind of went off and she couldn't find Spike and she was kind of off on her own or something like that, I don't know. But I was like, okay, Vicious, he's technically still alive, but I'm like, the only thing I can think of is he's going to escape at some point. I just don't understand. That's all that can happen is like he escapes and Julia takes over for a minute. I guess she's gonna be the villain, but maybe not. Like, because she tried to kill Spike, but he's alive. So is she gonna go after him now? Like, it's just a lot of questions are up in the air because I'm like, they've changed so much with her character. It just like threw everything off because I'm like, it still could have been the same show where Spike ends up escaping, he technically survives, Vicious ends up living as well, but he's still, in control. Like if he actually took over, jeez, I hate colds. If he actually took over the syndicate, I feel like that would have been fine. They just did it super fast, and then we see him on the hunt for Spike. That could have been like the whole second season. Like the characters go off to do their own thing. Jet is doing whatever. Faye is figuring out her past. Spike could still end up with Ed. That would have been cool. And maybe even Julia ends up going with him. Maybe they could have actually been on the run in the second season, and Vicious takes over. That could have been the actual story, and I think that would have been interesting. More interesting than the weird Julia's kind of the villain, but not really the villain now, because who knows? I don't know. But weird ending. Definitely a weird ending. I enjoyed most of the other stuff, though. I enjoyed the action in the show. I enjoyed the music. I enjoyed the aesthetic. I like what they did as far as how they played with the backstory. Obviously, with Spike, it was just every episode was like, here's his past. So it was a bit much compared to, the cool mystery of the original. But Jet was cool. They added a daughter for Jet. That was interesting enough, I guess. They still did the story where his buddy betrayed him and things like that. And it was like, okay, that's interesting enough. Having seen the anime, I knew that was going to happen. And it was just like, oh, cool. The person he thought it was is actually, the guy that's sleeping with his wife. And that's not actually the case and things like that. And they definitely make Jet have an even harder time because, he didn't just lose his wife. He, lost his child and then now it's like he has to, at the very end when she's like, Daddy, I want to go home. And it's like, dang, she called him Daddy and stuff like that. It's like, they just made his life even harder for the guy. And I'm just like, well, this blows. So it was definitely interesting. It was definitely interesting the way they kind of just added onto his pain. And I was like, well, that's kind of effed up. But definitely interesting. The stuff with Faye's, fake mom, I enjoyed that episode. I think that was definitely a good episode. There are other parts that were good. I don't know if I think that might actually be my favorite episode, beginning to end. I was like, okay, I like the story of that, how it unfolds. Jet watching his daughter's recital and Spike just fighting the people in the background. I think that might be my favorite episode. And then of course it ends up being this weird sex game for her mom and stuff. And I'm just like, that's weird. That's definitely weird, but funny. The whole episode, I was like, this might be the best. Beginning to end, one full episode, I think was probably the best. The episode where they get Ein might be my second favorite, and I think I enjoyed that. Jet going through when he got the doll, gets run over, he runs into the fire, then it of course drops in the trash and stuff. Hilarious. So really enjoyed that episode too, but I think those are probably my top two. I think the season finale actually is entertaining. It's really just them changing up that ending, because I was like, okay, everything could still go like the anime does, where like I said, Vicious survives, Spike survives, they go their separate ways. But it was like, no, they made it super weird with Julia taking over like that. So it was something to behold, and I'm curious what we're gonna get for season 2. But all in all, I still enjoyed it. I think the action was really good in the show. I think they did a good anime to live action translation of the actual action for the show. So I enjoyed that. Like I said, the characters entertaining enough. Jet was perfect. Ein was perfect. Spike was cool. Faye I thought was a little too different, but the way that she transitioned as she started to actually bond, bond with the characters, I enjoyed. So I was cool with that. Vicious. I wish he was actually more vicious. If we just got him killing a bunch of people and less issues of him being like a mentally messed up dude because his dad treated him like crap and he always had to like prove himself. I think it would have been better. I think it would have been better. Julia just not being a random villain at the end would have been a million times better because it was just so weird. It just felt out of nowhere. That's even the other thing. If it was ever somewhat hinted at that she was like, she kind of given him, like if they'd hinted at the fact that she wanted him dead and she wanted to actually take over before she even knew about Spike, at least we would have seen it coming. When it got to the end, and then it was like, oh, she just wants to take over, and she literally shoots Spike because he doesn't want to do that. It was like, that made no sense to me, because I'm like, this dude was already shot because he fell in love with you. Like, it's weird to hate him for that. Like, it just seemed so out of nowhere, and it's like, that's a dumb reason to be mad at a guy where she just stops loving him, which she could stop loving him, but to go, love and hate, I guess, being that thin line thing that everybody talks about, I guess that's what it was, but it just seemed so weird. It was like, they could have just gone their separate ways and been like, look, Spike could be like, I still love you, I still want us, but I do not want the Syndicate. And she's like, I still want us, but I do want the Syndicate. And that just keeps them separated until, whatever they make up, I guess, for season 2. But it was like, no, she just straight up hates him. So I'm like, I guess she has to be the villain because she shot him. And I don't think he's going to try to kill her just to get revenge, but I just don't know. Because in my head, a part of me that's really freaked out is like, what if they tried to make Spike and Vicious team up? Which I think would look cool. But story-wise, I'd be like, that is so far from anything that should actually happen compared to the original, of course, that it would just be odd and wrong. Almost like just straight up wrong. But a part of me is like, they might actually do it and make them like reconcile, and then Julia's like the full-on villain, and then they team up to take her down. Makes no sense, but neither does Julia becoming a villain at all. So I don't know. But we'll see what happens either way. We'll love to know your thoughts on this live-action adaptation. It beats Death Note. There's that. That's not saying much. Everything beats Death Note. But we'd love to know your thoughts. Please put your comments down in the comment section below. Sorry, I've been coughing. Doesn't make me happy either. But please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.